introductions. My name is Tim Brown. I'm the lead organizer for Philadelphia Neighborhood Networks, and the first speaker representing Philadelphia's Protect Our Vote Coalition, which includes a variety of citizens who will introduce themselves in due course. We come before you today to state for the record our objections to the approval on February 20th of the purchase of the ES&S Express vote machines as the next voting system for Philadelphia. Over the next few minutes, speakers for these organizations will describe the fatal shortcomings in the procurement process as well as flaws in the approval itself. We will argue, one, that the city commissioners steered the contract to a selected vendor whose product is neither the best value nor the best solution for Philadelphia's voting needs. Two, that the Board of Commissioners should and must rescind this approval on several grounds, including flaws in the procurement process and in the validity of the vote. And finally, that this process has been so improperly and completely compromised as to be legally indefensible and therefore must be reversed so that a new process can be put in place before more time is lost. We understand that this may not be a task that you anticipated dealing with. We wish we didn't have to be here today. But the issue is that this procurement was so poorly handled and its execution so legally flawed that it's unlikely to withstand scrutiny that is sure to come from many quarters, including the city controller and the auditor general, both of whom have already delivered clear warnings which the commissioners chose to disregard. A failure to address this quickly will burden the courts with complex litigation and burden the Philadelphia taxpayers with legal costs. It will likely prevent Philadelphia from putting a new voting system in place by November, perhaps even by 2020, which the state threatens to decertify the existing voting machines. The way to stop this unfolding disaster is to intervene now, so that this procurement can be conducted properly in accordance with the law. And please keep in mind, while this current course may cause some delay, there is still time to do this correctly and meet the Commissioner's self-imposed November deadline. But even if we must introduce a new system in 2020, that choice is far better than forcing a flawed system into place, one that election security experts argue is problematic. Philadelphia is the keystone to national elections, so the choice we make here has national ramifications. In the end, it comes down to this. Assuring that our votes are correctly counted is more important than any self-imposed deadline. Because if we can't count on our vote, we lose our democracy. Thank you for your time. Our next speaker, Gloria Gilman, will summarize some of the principal witnesses in the procurement process.
Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Gloria Gilman. I'm the chair of Philly Neighborhood Networks and a committee person in the Second Ward. The procurement of voting systems was supposed to use best value procurement. It did not. Best value is a recent process that was voted in to amend the Home Rule Charter in May 2017. It allows for factors in addition to price to be considered instead of requiring the city to pick the lowest cost option. The stated purpose of best value is to ensure that when the city takes into consideration other important factors in addition to the price of goods and services, the award of the contract will be made in an open, fair, and transparent process, providing the best value for the city. Section 6 describes how to ensure the integrity of the process. 1, avoid favoritism toward vendors, suppliers, or contractors. 2, avoid ethical misconduct by city employees and officials. 3, provide a fair and equal yet competitive proposal process for all potential vendors, suppliers, or contractors. 4, promote transparency in the selection process. And 5, keep all information obtained through the selection process confidential. But that's not what happened here. This process did not promote transparency. The city commissioners launched an RFP over the holidays with an exceptionally short timeline. They waited a month and a half before convening the only 2 very short notice, 3 days actually, public meetings on the subject. They provided no information on their website, not even a link to the RFP. Contrary to other counties, they held no public demonstrations of the systems under consideration and demonstrated no real interest in transparency or public feedback. Philadelphia City Controller Rebecca Reinhardt wrote a letter on February 8th to express her concerns over the lack of transparency, lack of public engagement, and lack of expert input. She wrote, an important component of best value is transparency. Residents need to receive the information from the city necessary to be comfortable that the process followed will lead to the best possible outcome for them. Otherwise, the flexibility provided by best value could be used to select vendors not in the best interests of taxpayers, but but to support the interests of those in power. She's right. This was not in the best interest of taxpayers. The flexibility provided by best value has been misused. Pennsylvania's Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale, has also raised concerns about transparency and the clear bias towards a particular vendor. On February 20th, he said, "I have serious concerns about the process that led to the latest commission vote, and I urge City Council to review it carefully." Best value was supposed to avoid favoritism toward vendors and to provide a fair and equal yet competitive proposal process for all potential vendors. But that's not what happened here. The favoritism toward a vendor was obvious to anyone who knows the current voting system choices. Among several examples, the most telling is that 15% of the scoring credit is given for a ballot face and style that accommodates the city's large candidate pool and offers a familiar look and feel. The commissioner's slideshow reinforced the preference for a full-face machine that looks like the current machines. But there's only one full-face system, the ES&S Express Vote XL. Concerned citizens groups have been saying publicly since mid-January that that machine was sure to be the winner. On February 20th, the commissioners confirmed it, giving a head start.
We're approaching twice the 2-minute limit for speakers.
I have one more concept. Giving a head start to one vendor is not a fair and equal yet competitive proposal process. The favoritism enjoyed by the ES&S proposal is further demonstrated by the outcome of the procurement commissioner's review and scoring. Despite the scoring advantages given to ES&S, the proposal from Dominion Voting Systems received a materially indistinguishable score and was recommended equally by the procurement commissioner, who recommended that the board should choose either of the two and retain the other as a backup. The board ignored that recommendation without explanation. By choosing ES&S alone, the commissioners ensured that the city would have no alternative in place should difficulties arise with ES&S. This was not best value procurement.
Thank you for that.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Scoblin from Citizens for Better Elections. The criteria that were used for the RFP were extraordinary. I've read RFPs and bids from around the country, and I've never seen anything like it. Why should familiarity be a top priority? The old Danaher voting machines were first sold in 1984. They predate Microsoft Windows. This was an opportunity to upgrade to something new and better, not something familiar. What you normally would see in RFP is public input, expert recommendations, best practices, open data, security, usability, and accessibility. Those are normal, reasonable criteria. I want to show you how outside the mainstream Philadelphia is now. And this is a map of Pennsylvania, and thank you. The 23 counties in dark green have selected or already own hand-marked paper ballot systems. The 6 counties in light green have indicated they're likely to select them. The 4 counties in red, including Philadelphia, have chosen touchscreens for all voters. The light red counties are not quite like Philadelphia because they're buying touchscreens and optical scanners. They could switch to hand-marked paper ballots in the future just by keeping half of their touchscreens in storage. Crawford County is even leasing their system. Having optical scanners allow these counties to scan absentee ballots, which will be important if no excuse absentee voting passes, which is expected. Only Philadelphia will be fully locked into an all-in-one touchscreen system with no ability to scan ballots. Instead, this is what the Philadelphia ballot will look like. Philadelphia hasn't seen it before today. It has barcodes on top that contain the votes. I hope that you can read barcode fluently because you'll need to verify that those are correct. These barcodes go against the recommendation of the Blue Ribbon Commission on Pennsylvania's election security. Their report says the commission does not recommend systems with barcodes or QR codes as they are not human readable. There's a summary of your choices below the barcodes, which is human readable. You'll have to trust that they match up and that nothing was added or omitted. You'll also need to remember all of your votes so that you can verify them against this list. In September, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine released a thorough report called Securing the Vote, which recommends against this type of summary. It says, unless a voter takes notes while voting, BMDs that print only selections with abbreviated names and descriptions of the contest are virtually unusable for verifying voter intent. If a voter can't verify the barcodes and the selections are virtually unusable for verifying their intent, then we cannot know that the votes were cast and counted correctly. Even a recount or post-election audit would not help. Poor accessibility for voters with disabilities is another serious issue. Philadelphia should have made accessibility a priority, especially since it remains under a consent decree to make polling places accessible. Not all voting machines are equally accessible, and the ExpressVote XL has major problems. The Department of State had voters with physical challenges test the ExpressVote XL. I'll just read you two of the many findings. None of the participants were able to verify their paper ballot on the XL. Every participant had at least one problem, despite relatively high election knowledge and digital experience. Other voting systems do not have similar problems. These touchscreen computers are certainly hackable and more likely to flip votes from one candidate to another, but what worries me the most is their resilience. Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea don't need to change any votes to sway an election. If they can take out the power to these machines, or hack them just enough that they crash or malfunction all day, then lines get long, and frustrated Philadelphia voters stay home. Availability of voting
In 3:15, please summarize.
Availability of voting is just as important as integrity. Commissioner Schmidt claimed on Twitter that the new system will be resilient. How? Because of backup hand-marked paper ballots always available at the
Starting with the RFP, neither the public nor independent experts were consulted. Outside independent experts, that is, experts not affiliated with either the city or a voting system vendor, were not consulted, either in the development of the RFP or in evaluation of the voting systems. I'm sure you know that the city's best value guidelines require a, quote, open, fair, and transparent process that avoids favoritism in best value procurement. Best procurement guidelines require incorporating feedback from stakeholders throughout the city. But stakeholders throughout the city were not notified, so there was no feedback to get. There was no information on the voting systems or the RFP posted on the commissioner's website. There wasn't any information on the procurement process posted there until a single notice of two public comment sessions was posted 3 days in advance of these sessions, just 5 weeks before the commissioners planned to vote. In fact, I learned about the public comment session only because a council person sent me an email after I expressed an interest about the process. There was no public information available about any of the voting systems. There were no links to information on the commissioner's website. There was no public hearings on eligible voting systems. There was no listing of which voting systems or machines were even being considered. Although the RFP specifies applicant demos to take place from January 14th to 17th, 2019, they didn't occur, at least not to public knowledge. The Department of State held 5 voting system demos in November and December, but for Philadelphia, the closest demonstration was in Doylestown, a location which was inconvenient, if not impossible, for the majority of Philadelphia voters to attend. These are only some of the vulnerabilities that the procurement process is subject to in terms of legal challenge. It's now up to you to make sure that Philadelphia has the most secure and least expensive voting machines and chooses them in accordance with the letter and the spirit of the law and applicable regulations. Thank you for your time. The next speaker will be Jim Marsh.
Thank you.
Hi, Your Honors. My name is Jim Marsh. I'm a resident of Philadelphia, affiliated with Invisible Philadelphia and Protect Our Vote Coalition. So you've heard a lot about the lack of public engagement and information by the commissioners about the voting machine process. So that begs the question, so what were the commissioners doing during this time period where they were not engaging with Philadelphia? And the answer is that according to their own answers to Auditor General DePasquale and to his request for information, they were traveling to various other counties, not Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania to apparently machine expos, which Philadelphia never had. They were going to out-of-state places such as Missouri and West Virginia to perform some kind of voting machine-related activities. We don't know. The reporting is very skimpy. And as far back as 2013, of course, Commissioner Schmidt went to Omaha, Nebraska, to the ES&S offices. Of course, we have very little detail on all these things. We wouldn't even know about them had not Auditor General DePasquale propagated his questions and received their brief answers on February 11th 2019 via email, which he made public along with all the other responses by the other counties. So the consequence of this is that Philadelphia was, by their activities in all these other areas except Philadelphia, all that time was taken up and effectively excluded Philadelphia from the public process, which Philadelphia and Philadelphia voters should have been included in. Also, another aspect of this is just the time delay in general that the commissioners self-imposed. Their request for information was propagated on June 4th, 2018. The request for proposals was not issued until November 30th, 2018. That's a 6 months delay. Nothing in Philadelphia happened to public knowledge within that time period. Even after the November 30th RFP, which included a scheduling of demos to take place on January 14th, January 17th, those demos never took place, even though they were approximately 6 weeks after the RFP was issued. And they were only several days after the minimal public comment meetings, which were on January 10th and 12th, which were possibly a total of 3 hours. Those public comment periods should have taken place not at the end of the process, but in the middle. So the basic point here is that both in terms of the lack of substantial or substantive information and engagement with Philadelphia and the Philadelphia voters, and also by truncating the process by their own actions, the city commissioners have excluded and shut out Philadelphia from this process. This is an improper process for the selection of machines and should be annulled. It's not a proper process. And for the selection of machines would have an important civic function, and or any other kind of procurement. This is not a process that's a model. So
Thank you for your comments, sir. It's been 3.5. We want to be fair to everybody.
Sure. So I'm being followed by Emmy DeChico, who will talk about, among other things, the fact that the commissioners may not even have had a legal capacity to contract or to make a decision about these machines. And I will pass the on to Emmy DeChico. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Emily DeChico. I'm an organizer of March on Harrisburg, and I live in Point Breeze in Philadelphia. I'm going to discuss why the board election's February 20th decision was not legitimate. I'm going to shorten my statement a little bit for the sake of time, but I'll submit a statement for the record. First, 2 board members were conflicted by their own re-elections at the time of the vote. Knowing that they would, at some point, be replaced, it became increasingly obvious that their tenure violated Section 301 of the Pennsylvania Election Code. Because of this, the commissioners had a major direct conflict of interest. Since any time taken on the selection process would be subtracted from their available time to campaign, they rushed the process so that they could get to campaigning. But that deadline was for their benefit, not for the integrity of the process or the best interests of the public. The only reason for them to rush the process was so that they, and not you, could be the ones to vote on the procurement. Second, those same 2 board members were also conflicted, and that they were voting to approve a system that they would be running in, assuming they win their primaries in May, to keep their own salaries and benefits. This is exactly the kind of conflict of interest that the Pennsylvania Election Code seeks to avoid. Section 301C states clearly, whenever a member of the Board of County Commissioners is a candidate for nomination or election to any public office, the President Judge of the Court of Common Pleas shall appoint a judge or an elector of the county to serve in his stead. Finally, at the time of the vote on February 20th, 2 of the 3 commissioners were ineligible to sit on the board. Already fundraising and with campaign committees, Commissioners Dealey and Schmidt were already candidates as defined by state law under Pennsylvania Ethics Act, Section 1102. They could have and should have requested to be replaced as required by Section 301 of the Pennsylvania Election Code before they started voting as members of the Board of Elections. They did not. The day after that vote, Dealey was replaced by order of the President Judge of the Common Pleas Court. Schmidt, too, was replaced 1 day later. Both of them also filed their paperwork with the Philadelphia Board of Ethics Dealey on the 21st and Schmidt on the 25th. Of course, they did not then decide to run for office. They didn't at that moment realize they were candidates. They knew, as their donors, and the public certainly knew, that they were already candidates well before February 20th. They simply delayed their request as candidates to replace until after the vote on this purchase. The only reason for them to wait was to make sure that they, and not their legitimate replacements on the board, would be the ones to vote on the voting machines procurement. As soon as they got that vote done, they began to campaign openly. To pretend that they're already not candidates at the time of the vote is to make a mockery of the law. As candidates, Dealey and Schmidt were not eligible to serve as Board of Election members. The
In 3 minutes, please, summarize your answer.
The February 20th vote was and is invalid. An objection to the vote taking place on that basis was put forward on the record at the meeting before the vote and was ignored. Any contract that comes out of this fatally flawed and illegitimate process will be open to challenge at every stage, and challenges should be expected because it will fall apart in discovery. Thank you so much for your time. Rich Cardello will be up next.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Rich Gardella. I'm a resident of Point Breeze also, and a member of the Protect Our Vote Coalition. And I kind of want to try to put all this together. The longer this goes on, the more likely we won't have a functional new voting system in place by November 2019, and possibly not even by 2020. We risk decertification of Philadelphia's voting machines by the state in 2020, a presidential election year. Every indication is that Commissioners Dealey and Schmidt intended from the very beginning of the process to select ES&S for this contract. Everything that they did was to make sure of that. They took extraordinary measures, from gaming the timeline, to depriving the public of our right to real input, to tailoring the RFP. Even as they raised campaign funds, even as print jobs were being paid for, and campaign staff were being hired, they took extraordinary care to maintain the thinnest pretense that they were not candidates, just so they could keep their positions on the board long enough to make sure that they, and not you, would vote on this purchase. We don't know exactly why they went to such lengths to make sure that this particular vendor would be selected. Even if they did it out of a sincere belief that the Express Vote XL, despite its failings in security, accessibility, and reliability, and despite its great expense, was the best system for the voters of Philadelphia, they had no right to predetermine the outcome. In fact, it's against the law. The people of Philadelphia were deprived of our legal right to participate. We were deprived of the intended benefits of the best value process that we voted for: public input, transparency, avoidance of favoritism, and in the end, best value. And now we stand to lose our right to have the safest, most reliable, and cost-efficient system to cast our votes in our democracy. Instead, we're having predetermined choice forced on us for reasons that we don't know. We're asking you to correct this process and restore these rights. We're asking you, the Board of Elections, to void the February 20 vote so that a procurement process that meets the requirements of the law can commence as soon as possible. Because we do need a new voting system. Almost there. We do need a new voting system. One that's reliable, auditable, secure, easy to use, and accessible. And we need it soon. We don't need cases to burden the courts and money and time to be wasted. We believe there's still just enough time to get this right for the voters of Philadelphia, who deserve so much more respect than what they've received so far.
Thank you, sir.
I have here collected copies of the statements, and I want to give them to each of you to be put on the record, along with a statement from attorney Mark Zecca that Wendy is going to, I'm sorry, what's your last name? Foreman. That Wendy Foreman will read short excerpts from. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Foreman. I'm from Center City. I'm not a member of the group. I'm here as a private citizen, voter, and very concerned. I'm here to summarize some excerpts from a letter from Mark Zecca, who is a lawyer who's followed the Board of Elections for several decades. And over 20 years, when he was a lawyer in the City of Philadelphia Law Department and represented his board in high-profile cases in the state and federal court, frequently he advised the board. He's singling out only one of the various legal reasons as to why the vote on the electrical voting machine contract that took place by Dealey and Schmidt on February 20th did not legally happen. There are certainly many other reasons of law policy and process that called for a vote to be revoked by you. The reason that Dealey and Schmidt are being singled out is obviously they've already lost the legal right to vote at that meeting in advance of the meeting. The focus here is on the various legal and factual reasons why they clearly lost their right to sit under the election code, the Pennsylvania Ethics Act, the city code, and Pennsylvania common law refusal law. By participating in that meeting, Dealey and Schmidt placed the entire electrical voting machine contract on legal quicksand. The contract would be voidable by numerous parties withstanding in court. Far from speeding up the process, their illegal participation directly did the opposite. Right now, this vote is on legal quicksand and throws Pennsylvania's election process into doubt. Nobody can have legitimate interest in your not voting to revoke the approval, which you most certainly have the legal authority to do. You are the board. You can grant approval, you can revoke it. By inaction by you would be action by you. You can't duck this. The fact that Dealey and Schmidt voted when they lacked the authority does not tie your hands now. Quite the opposite. It compels you to correct a fully invalid vote that was a legal nullity. There are numerous reasons why you should revoke the approval. But they all add up to one thing. You must revoke that vote for the good of the people of Pennsylvania and for the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? And then, if there are no other comments, then we'll move to the supervisor's reports by Joe Lynch and Kevin Ritchie.
That's it.
Thank you. All right, next will be deputy's report by the custodian.
Good morning, Commissioner and Your Honors. The Pennsylvania Department of State has convened a statewide post-election audit working group to study post-election audit models to enhance Pennsylvania's post-election audit process based on current national standards. One type of audit the working group is considering is a risk limiting audit designed to provide statistical evidence that the election tabulation is correct. This is accomplished through hand counting of key samples of voter-verified paper records. Improving Pennsylvania's audit procedures was a large component of the Pennsylvania Blue Ribbon Commission's report, and the state has committed to having every county employ the new enhanced audit procedures by the 2022 general election. Through Philadelphia's participation in the statewide working group, Philadelphia and Mercer counties volunteered to pilot the new enhanced post-election audit procedures developed by the working group during this November's general election. This is all made possible by the fact that we are employing a new voting system that employs a voter verifiable paper ballot in the November 19 election. Philadelphia and Mercer counties were the first counties in the state whose results will be audited using the new enhanced national standards, and the audits will utilize the plain language text that voters use to verify their choices. Philadelphia voters will therefore be assured that their votes were counted as they intended.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there's no further business,
We adjourn this meeting.
we're adjourned.
Adjourn.
Thank you all for coming. Great talking to you.
Thank you. I said, I'm not here first, buddy. I said, that's you.